We apologize for interrupting your doom scrolling. Now, for some positive leftist news.
Well, it's a rare condition in this day and age to read any good news on the newspaper page, but that's only because you're listening to the mainstream media. If you're really paying attention, you'll find that there's positive leftist news all around us. And here's just some for this month. I'll be your host, Thought Slime. And I don't know why I'm like this. I'm always like this. The Native American Youth and Family Center's 11th annual Near Chokiko powwow doubled in size this year, with hundreds gathering in celebration of the organization's land-back accomplishment, which enabled them to reclaim the area as a cultural home for Indigenous people residing in the Portland area. Powwow dancers floated across the arena to a backdrop of drum beats, telling their story. Tamara Henderson, the NAYA powwow organizer, said, "Powwows have become a contemporary way Native people have found to bring themselves together in the community and have an opportunity to celebrate and to honor our ancestors, to celebrate our past, and to celebrate our future." Oscar Arana, NAYA's interim CEO, said, "Being able to reclaim Near Chokiko is just another wonderful example of self-determination for the Native community." In a landmark ruling, Brazil's Supreme Court has rejected efforts to restrict Indigenous peoples' rights to reservations on their ancestral lands. 6 of the 11 justices ruled in favor of restoring territory to the Joklang people, who were brutally evicted from their territories by mercenaries. The ruling sets a precedent for hundreds of Indigenous land claims and is expected to have widespread consequences for Indigenous land rights. The decision was met with celebration and tears of joy by members of Indigenous tribes from across the country. On September 19th, one day after the UN Climate Ambition Summit, Indigenous activists and their allies took over Times Square in New York to paint a giant mural with the message, "No green colonialism, land back now." The action was in protest of Biden's push towards climate solutions that threaten Indigenous peoples across Turtle Island. Crystal Tubles, executive director of the national Indigenous organization Honor the Earth, said, "For too long, Native lands and communities have borne the brunt of harm from mining and other extractive industries. As the federal government moves to support clean energy development, this cannot come at the expense of clean water or Indigenous rights. This familiar assault on Native lands and communities is another wave of colonialism, and we will not stand by and allow our lands to be sacrificed." Indigenous nations are on the front lines of the climate fight and are actively resisting mining projects in multiple places across the so-called USA. Remember, it's land back here and everywhere. On September 9th to 10th, over 15,000 people gathered in Ostend, Belgium. Manifiesta intended to launch a new political year on the left in Europe. The fest began in 2010 as a venue for solidarity and network building. The fest addresses topics such as healthcare, the climate catastrophe, feminism, anti-imperialism, and decolonization, including Palestinian solidarity. Manifiesta includes political and cultural education, as well as radical art and musical performances. Workers' Party of Belgium member and Palestinian activist Salah Hamouri called the festival a convivial and joyous place where people get the opportunity to discuss important instances of struggle and solidarity, a beautiful expression of international solidarity. The 47th three-day Avante Festival took place in Portugal, with more than 70 discussions of social, political, and economic issues. The fest also boasted musical concerts, film screenings, exhibitions, literary events, food festivals, and sporting events. The central theme of this year's festival was the 50th anniversary of the April Revolution, otherwise known as the Carnation Revolution of April 25, 1974, which brought down the authoritarian Estado Novo regime. Other themes included international solidarity, resisting neocolonialism, anti-war advocacy, healthcare, agriculture, addressing the housing crisis and the climate catastrophe. While addressing a rally on Sunday, PCP Secretary General Paulo Raimundo stated, "When the vast majority is the target of injustice and inequality, and when the workers and the people become aware of the strength they have, the strength of their struggle, and the strength of their unity, then this will really change." We reported on the Kenmure Street protests of 2021, where the neighbors of 2 sick men stood up to protect them from the Scotland Home Office and police. The men had been taken from their home and were detained in a van with alleged charges of immigration violations. Neighbors surrounded the van and staged a protest for 8 hours until the men were released. On top of that tremendous news, one of the protesters who was arrested for blocking immigration enforcement was acquitted of all charges this month after an 8-day trial. The sheriff determined that none of the police officers were credible or reliable witnesses. Let the record show, ACAB. On the 9th of September 2018, the People's Forum in New York City was founded as a movement incubator to unite progressives in the US and beyond. This month, the Forum celebrated its 5-year anniversary. Throughout its existence, it has worked tirelessly to support the strengthening of progressive and socialist organizations, launching solidarity campaigns, mobilizing against U.S. imperialist efforts, and spearheaded gatherings of socialist and working-class organizers. Leanne Sima-Fuliahan, the education director of the People's Forum, stated, "Over the past 5 years, TPF has become a reference for people who are seeking to understand what's going on in the world around them, and who want a place where they can ask questions and exchange ideas, and where there's space for socialist and internationalist ideas as well. We are in a time where there's less and less public and political space for this, and TPF is committed to not only maintaining that space, but growing it." On the 15th of September, in a historic first, U.S. autoworkers went on strike at all 3 of the largest automakers at the same time. Calling their movement the Stand-Up Strike, the union United Auto Workers president Shawn Fain stated, "This is our generation's defining moment." In Michigan, Ohio, and Missouri, 13,000 of the 146,000 UAW members employed at the Big Three walked off the job in 3 assembly plants. The atmosphere was electric, with Wayne workers singing "Mighty Mighty Union." If demands are not reached, the unions are threatening to increase the strike in gradual waves to 146,000 strong. As Fain explained, the stand-up strike gives our union the ability to escalate all the way up to a national, all-out work stoppage if necessary. It keeps the companies guessing and builds economic leverage against the Big Three over time if they refuse to negotiate a contract we deserve. How many times do bosses have to learn that you don't mess with auto workers? They're about to find out again. In the Indian state of Haryana on September 9th, an estimated 20,000 frontline health workers issued a joint document calling on governments and international agencies to uphold their rights. Even though they routinely perform dozens of critical tasks related to preventative, reproductive, maternal, and child, and broadly community care, they are not ratified by the government as public sector workers and therefore are precarious workers that do not receive basic labor rights and protections, including a minimum wage, sick leave, or pensions. This marks their 5th countrywide labor action since the start of COVID-19, as well as several state and local level protests and strikes. Community health workers in India, Pakistan, and Nepal have united in their release of a charter of demands calling on governments and international agencies to recognize and uphold their collective rights. Kate Lappin, Regional Secretary for Asia Pacific, said in a press statement, "CHWS plays an essential role in health education, monitoring, and vaccination programs. Working in the community, they are the primary messengers of governmental policies and campaigns. They've been the backbone for improvements in maternal and infant mortality rates across nations. They identify causes of diseases in the community. We hope that the governments consider the Charter of Demands launched today and improve working conditions of the CHWS. This international solidarity is exactly what we need to see more of." On August 31st, approximately 900 workers at a department store in Tokyo staged the nation's first industrial strike in 61 years. Sogo in Cebu, a unit of retail giant 7 & I, will be sold to U.S. fund Fortress Investment Group. Workers took to the streets to call for job and business community guarantees. Protest Representative Takeshi Sakamoto stated, "What we wanted was to have a continuous discussion before the closing of the deal, but we did not get it. So that's why we came here to strike. Japan's labor movement has been dormant for far too long. Let's hope this action stirs the Japanese working class." Brazil's Supreme Court has annulled all former charges against Brazilian President Lula, and also all evidence presented by the now-defunct Lava Jato Task Force. The charges included corruption and bribery convictions, banning him from the presidential race in 2018, and landing him in prison in the same year in a sentencing of 8 years and 10 months. In his 135-page ruling, Judge Antonio Dias Toffoli said, "It was one of the biggest judicial errors in the history of the country. It was a setup, the result of a project of power of certain public agents in their objective to conquer the state by apparently legal means, but with methods and actions against the law." Most egregiously, the court has found that the judge who originally sentenced Lula had conspired with the prosecution. On the eve of September 11th, tens of thousands of people came together at the National Stadium in Santiago, Chile, in honor of the victims of the military dictatorship installed 50 years prior during the coup against the democratically elected government of Salvador Allende. The CIA-backed Pinochet regime forced approximately 20,000 people into the National Stadium, making it into the nation's largest center of torture and detention during the dictatorship. Paying their respects, people came armed with dozens of photos of the 40,000 victims. Earlier the same day, Chilean President Gabriel Boric held an official ceremony called Democracy Always in the presence of several renowned leaders from the region. In his address, Boric declared, "Today we have the responsibility to face what happened in those years with truth, justice, and reparation. And only by assuming the debts of the past and really healing those wounds will a harmonious coexistence and the construction of a society that projects itself humanely towards the future be possible." Uplifting words, but time will tell if Boric will follow these words with action. Caribbean nations are preparing formal letters calling on the British royal family to take accountability and make reparations for slavery, since their ancestors bought and exploited enslaved people, and the royal family benefits from colonial plunder to this day. National reparations commissions will also approach Lloyd's of London, the global center for ensuring the slave trade between 1640 and the early 19th century, and the Church of England, whose leaders owned enslaved people, with demands of financial payments and reparative justice for their historic role in the slave trade. Arlie Gill, a lawyer and chair of the Island Nations Reparations Commission, references King Charles, saying, "We are not saying that he should starve himself and his family. We are not asking for trinkets. But we believe we can sit around a table and discuss what can be made available for reparative justice." On August 23rd, protesters took to the streets in New York calling for an end to the US-French domination in West Africa. The movement was organized by the December 12th movement, calling for France out of Africa, hands off Niger, and rallied outside the French mission to the United Nations in New York City. Speakers drew attention to ongoing resource extraction in the area and the dire consequences to local people, and demanded the removal of US and French military from West Africa and the closure of military bases. It was a powerful battle cry against US and French imperialism, against ongoing colonialism, and a call for self-determination in the continent. You can sign the open letter linked in the description box to show solidarity. On Saturday, the 2nd of September, the people of Cork, Ireland, rallied in solidarity for Cork City library workers, the Cork Rebels for Peace group, and Cork Says No to Racism. They stood in opposition to a right-wing rally entitled Ireland Says No, whose aim was to get rid of so-called pornographic LGBT+ books. Saoirse Mackin of the Trans Plus Pride Cork and the Social Democrats said, "It should be down to parents and children, not a group of people trying to wipe a series of books off the face of the earth." This counter-protest came as part of a wave of support in response to growing anti-LGBT sentiment sweeping across the Western world. Communities will continue to come out in support of their LGBT loved ones, and hate will never win. On Wednesday, the 6th of September, in a landmark ruling, Mexico's Supreme Court decriminalized abortion. The Supreme Court unanimously decided that the criminalization of women, pregnant persons, and the healthcare professionals for abortion are unconstitutional and violate their human rights. The court also ordered the removal of abortions as a crime from the federal penal code. An estimated 1 million abortions are performed in Mexico each year, according to their official records, a third of which are performed in unsafe conditions, the fifth leading cause of the nation's maternal mortality. This hits marginalized pregnant people the hardest. Federal public health care institutions, even in states where abortion is legal, must now provide abortion services upon request. This win comes after a petition was filed by the Information Group for Chosen Reproduction, a reproductive rights group based in Mexico City. In the words of Isabel Fulda, Deputy Director of GIRE, "Today we have achieved something that a short while ago seemed very far away, but never impossible. That is why we are here." What a thrill and pride to be part of this struggle, and to be able to see, share, and celebrate its results. On September 11th, hundreds of women, as well as members of feminist and human rights groups, marched to Ecuador's capital in protest against gender-based violence. The mobilizations marked the one-year anniversary of the femicide of 34-year-old lawyer Maria Belón Bernal at the hands of her cop husband, Germán Fernando Carceres, inside the police academy. Placards and posters read, "We want to live," and "Not one woman less," raising slogans such as, "Alert, alert, the feminist struggle is marching through Latin America." They set out clear policy demands to prevent violence against women. The protest also raised anti-police awareness, exemplified by the words of Bernal's mother, Otavalo, "My daughter was killed inside the police high school." It wasn't on the street, let's not forget that. It was at a police institution, at the hands of a police officer who was on duty, and in the midst of many police officers who later assured that they did not hear anything. Remember, comrades, friends don't let friends date cops. The California government has sued some of the world's largest fossil fuel companies for damages related to climate change. As you know, we here at PLN are no cheerleaders for the US federal or state governments, but if the case is successful, it could set an important legal precedent in relation to climate damages. This will only make it easier for activists and citizens to take big oil to task for their destruction of our planet. Caving under the pressure of a mounting political crisis, Ontario Premier Doug Ford has reversed his decision to open the Greenbelt for development. The Ontario Greenbelt is a protected area of green space, farmland, forest, wetlands, and watersheds in southern Ontario, some of the only protected land we have left. Ford had announced 11 months ago that he planned to open 7,400 acres of protected land for his real estate buddies to build on, threatening wetlands, forests, and 29 species at risk. After strong public opposition and the resignation of several ministers and staffers, a solemn Ford apologized on September 21st and promised to return all land to the Greenbelt and not touch the protected area again. As much as it seems that big money and big assholes are unstoppable, the people, united, are a much stronger force. Friends, if you have good news from the current month, please send your stories to mexi@protonmail.com. Thank you, Javi, for the positive news jams. Thank you to Cosmo for the positive news backgrounds. Thank you to Catherine, Mexi, Seb, Marshall, and Jacob for script writing and production. And thank you to Tristan for editing this video. And also, special thank you to me. I'm ThoughtSlime. If you'd like to support this project, please go to patreon.com/positiveleftistnews, or you can give a one-time tip via PayPal, link in the description box below.